She gave herself up for dead on an Atlantic beach, but she's been rescued by Delta, a naturopathic healer and teacher. And one morning after weeks of treatment, Angie wakes in this refuge with the woman who healed her and might teach her. Assateague Island, spring 2022. Angie couldn't recall a time she slept so much. When she opened her eyes, the mornings were already lit up. That dog, what a name, Sherlock. Once he heard her stir in the deep down comforter, he'd pad over from the doorway where he slept. He'd put his snout on the edge of the rough oaken sleigh bed and wag his tail. Angie knew dogs that barked at people in the morning. Sherlock was as quiet as Delta, who would bring Angie neuropathic teas and massage her meridians. Then she'd shuffle back to her kitchen or hum to herself at the workbench, where she'd reclaim whatever junk the surf threw onto what she called her beach. The sounds from her house felt different to Angie. Noises distinct from Philly or the Hamptons, the places where the music never stopped and somebody was always wheedling or snorting or uncapping a moan. Angie was starting to think of those noises as the soundtrack of a former life. In the morning, she drifted in and out of sleep as the sound of the waves boomed loudest, hours when Delta said the sea was at high tide. Delta was none of the things that Aurora or Tiffany or Alexandra had been on Angie's sex video sets. No swagger or panache, no buffed skin or enhanced parts or perfect painted bodies. Delta had looks to drive anyone away but devoted nieces, parents, or siblings. No one would ever start a family with a woman so coarse, but something deeper made Angie drink in the sight of her caretaker. Maybe something to learn. She stared down at the comforter wrapped around her knees and sat up in bed. The squares of brown, beige, and off-white on its cover were common cloth, scrubbed cotton, or maybe the Duralast sails Angie remembered from boats up in Sag Harbor. She pulled a palm across the comforter, feeling the differences in the textures of the reclaimed cloths. Outside the window, Angie could see Delta washing sand off a sail, the cloth strung over a hawser, lashed between two beech trees. Even though she'd been there for weeks, Angie still had to scan the room to remember where she was while she woke. She gathered the comforter over her shoulders and put her bare feet on the rough cedar of the floor. A rag rug of faded pastels lay in front of the doorway. Candles lined the shelves of the room, set beside some vases with great sprigs of what looked like weeds burnt at their tops. And then there were all the library books, or what must have been the kind of books that people borrowed and returned from the library, the kind Angie's grandmother read to her. She made her way outside with Sherlock at her heels, the dog bolting past her through the open screen door and down the steps, and then coming back to escort her. The air lay heavy with water and spray, the smell of kelp off the beach, all borne on the nip of a brisk wind. Angie sat on the next to bottom step and watched Delta work, unobserved, until Sherlock barked and wagged his tail. Delta turned to watch them. He thinks you've come out to play. Angie stretched her legs out toward her. Maybe I have. Delta grabbed the corner of the sail she was washing and shook it. The spray covered the dog, and he shook himself from head to tail. So you feel better then? Guess I do, a little. Just wanted to hear something besides the ocean. Too quiet for you? Quieter than I've ever heard. She ran a hand through her hair to brush it off her forehead. Or maybe not, Angie added after a moment. There was nap time in kindergarten, and this feels as good. Then my family had to move away. No kindergarten in the next school. Not for me. While she sat on the rough-cut steps, watching Delta work the sail, Angie felt warm. The day's weather was not, but inside her chest she felt a soft pulse growing, like a blot of orange ink spreading in a clear bowl of water. In kindergarten, Mrs. Elgin would stand beside her, holding a brush with a mouse ear of bristles, and coax, "Go ahead, dip in, and make something new." Angie washed unto Delta's life dying from being too pretty. In the quiet of the beach days, she decided that beauty carried a sadness somehow. Angie studied Delta. Here was a woman who'd crossed into her 40s, built more like a linebacker than a mystic from any movie. She wore muscle where curves lived on the girls in sex videos. Her nose was too large to overlook, and her knees had dimples below and above those fleshy joints. But under that mottled skin of her chest, Angie imagined a heartbeat so beautiful, her own heart stung just thinking of it. Maybe this was the start of what Delta called heartfelt health.